when you sign a pledge, and this isn't a pledge that says subject to my changing my mind. This is a pledge that really, I even think it's like legally binding. You want to know the truth. I don't care. I don't think it matters. I don't think I'll get 2 more votes. But honestly, you sign a pledge, and you're supposed to honor the pledge. I have guys out there, and they're really sore losers. They've broke their word. In my opinion, they should never be allowed to run for public office again, because what they did is disgraceful.
Presumptive GOP nominee Donald Trump at a rally in Maine last night, calling out his former competitors for the nomination who signed a pledge to support the eventual nominee but have thus far failed to do so. Can Donald Trump bring the grand old party together by getting some of the not ready to endorse Trump Republicans to finally climb aboard the Trump train? We'd like to get your thoughts on this, and you can call us to weigh in at 1-877-Newsmax. That's 1-877-639-7629. And to talk more about this and other items on the political agenda, we're pleased to be joined by Nancy Brinker. Nancy's the former U.S. ambassador to the Republic of Hungary and the former U.S. chief of protocol. She joins us tonight from Newsmax, New York. And we should also point out that you can watch Nancy here on Newsmax TV with her program, Conversations with Nancy Brinker. So, Nancy, it's great to have a conversation with you tonight on Newsmax Prime.
Thank you, JD, and always good to hear your voice and talk to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, we look back at the debates, and early on, there was a pledge that all the Republican candidates signed. A lot of people thought, oh, this is designed for Donald Trump to keep him in the party in case he lost. But now he's won the nomination, and so should there be some sort of ramifications for those candidates who signed the pledge but have been reluctant to support Mr. Trump as the nominee?
Well, you know, I think it just points out, JD, how contentious this election has been. And, you know, I hope we don't come to that where we have that kind of attitude and, you know, that going on in our party. I always go back, as so many other people do, to the Reagan-esque time. We don't, keep our fights within the party. We have got to, however, come together somehow. We do not want to create, so much chaos that we lose, and frankly, what I'm worried about are all of our down ballot candidates who are at risk. And I think there's some things that, and people shouldn't underestimate Donald Trump. He is a very smart man. He can do it if he wants, and it seems like he's trying harder these days. But we really have to have some unification and some consistency in message. And I'm hoping that people surrounding him will be people we know, recognize, respect. And I'd love to hear him just say to all of us who are probably labeled Republican establishment, I need you. Because when you need somebody and you tell them you need them, most times they'll respond and they'll want to help. And there's just been so much contentiousness in this election, name calling and everything else, and it's not necessary. We need to come together.
Nancy, I would agree, and by the same token, politics ain't beanbag, and you and I can go back in our recent memory, despite Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment, things have gotten tough before, and yet everybody has gotten together. You also said that you shouldn't underestimate Donald Trump, and indeed the poll numbers coming out in the latest Rasmussen survey back that up, because in that survey, Trump now leads Hillary Clinton 43% to 39%. 12% say they want another candidate. 5% remain undecided. Last week, Nancy, Mrs. Clinton had a 5-point lead in that same survey. So this is a pretty dramatic shift.
It's a dramatic shift, and it shows in a way, though, how much work each candidate has to do. She has a lot of work to do with the Bernie Sanders candidates. He has a lot of work to do with the Republican establishment, and things will go back and forth based on issues, as you know. And it'll be like this. It'll be very rocky, I believe, for quite a while. There are trust issues on her side. There are the other issues that we know on Mr. Trump's side. And so there, until we see more of an evening out, and until, it could be just a very, very tight election, or it could be a runaway by one of them. I'm not sure anybody can actually forecast that, JD. I just don't think so. I think it's going to be a very, very unusual year.
It is an unusual year, especially when you reference what we were talking about earlier. One of the loudest never-Trumpers is the man who precedes Donald Trump as the GOP presidential nominee. Mitt Romney, very recently at the Aspen Ideas Festival, had an assessment of Donald Trump's campaign that's not altogether flattering. Let's look and listen.
Donald Trump is pursuing a course on a policy basis and on a rhetoric and attitude basis, which is very different than traditional conservative thought and traditional conservative campaigns. But so far, he's been winning. And so I can't predict what the outcome's going to be.
Well, actually there, Mitt sounds a bit more diplomatic, but you know, Nancy, he goes on in that statement to say he can't see himself voting for Mr. Trump. It does sound as if he's softening up. By the same token, he says his family wants him to run. Look, there reaches a point.
Yeah, it's
where it gets to be absurd. Does it not?
Yeah, it does. And yeah, absolutely. It reaches a point where we have what we have. No one was a bigger fan of Mitt and Ann Romney. I just like them both very, very much and would have loved to have seen him as president, but it didn't happen. It just didn't happen. And now we're faced with a very different set of circumstances. And, you know, this is one of those years where the outsider mentality is reigning. Look at Brexit. Look at all of the issues. And people simply don't trust our system. They don't trust candidates they've known for a long time. I was in the Midwest recently, JD, and where I'm from, where I grew up, and I can't tell you how many factory workers and friends of mine are furious about what's going on in the country and are actually very, very avid Donald Trump devotees and don't want to hear anything else. They're absolutely against outsiders. They've had it. And so we have to deal with that. We have to bring the people that Donald's brought into the party. And, you know, it may be ours to shape the Republican Party. At some point, we got to stop and figure out how are we going to shape our party for the future. We owe that to our children.
And you know what's interesting, Nancy?
We owe that to our country.
Yes, ma'am. And what is interesting, and of course, you interviewed Kelly Ayotte, the senator from New Hampshire, and we hear that George W. Bush is going to go out on the campaign trail for Kelly and for my old friend and erstwhile opponent, Senator John McCain. Now, this, when it comes down to the Bush family, Bush 41, 43, and Jeb, to remain on the sidelines in this, it is spectacularly unhelpful, or is it, given Mr. Trump's reputation as an outsider?
Well, I think it's a very difficult circumstance. You know, I was and am an avid Jeb Bush supporter. I was an avid supporter and am of President George W. Bush, President George H.W. Bush. Laura Bush is a very close friend. It's a difficult situation, and frankly, the way Donald dealt with them during the campaign and dealt with people was brutal. You know, nobody.
But again, Nancy, to be fair, you and I remember 1988 and George Herbert Walker Bush and Bob Dole snapping to Vice President Bush, "Quit lying about my record." I mean, there have been fights before, and people have gotten together when things have been contentious. Let me just ask you this. It seems with the Bush family, the whole notion of and I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it this way, open borders and amnesty, they have a very different view than Donald Trump. Is that basically the split in the party, regardless of behavior and personal feelings? Do you think that is the issue keeping the Bushes on the sidelines?
You know, very possibly. I don't know, because I've never discussed that issue with them, and I would hate to conjecture or put words in anyone's mouth. But I will tell you that they've been one of the finest families I've ever known, of people who have led this country with great conviction, great service, great loyalty. This is a very unusual and different time we're in. And the problem is, who do we want to be running our country? And it may not be either candidate. But I know one thing for sure. I do not want to see the Republican Party dissolve. When you travel around the world and you see countries that have uneven electorates, and you have one party or two parties overwhelming a country, that's a very different thing. We have a democracy. We need a balance of power. We need good Republicans, we need good Democrats, and we need people who reach across the aisle. And I am, you mentioned Kelly Ayotte. people like Rob Portman, all the candidates, the Republicans that we have running for Senate and the House. I'm doing all I can to campaign for them, because at the end of the day, we've got to make sure we have a very balanced and good electorate.
One final question. You have a right to a secret ballot, but are you supporting Donald Trump for president, Nancy?
Well, I'm going to take a very long look and support who I think will be the best president, and always I think the best president will come from the Republican Party. It's just the way I am. So
well, I guess, Nancy, we will have to put you down as a definite maybe, and we'll talk to you before Election Day. Ambassador Nancy Brinker tonight from Newsmax, New York. Nancy, we thank you for your time. Up next, congressional challenger Paul Nehlen. Stay with us.